On this week's episode of the Essential Coaching Skills Podcast, Michael Johnson of the podcast Majic for Life turns the tables and interviews me. So yes, me. I think you'll agree it's just absolutely fascinating. You are listening to the Essential Coaching Skills Podcast, a show devoted to uncovering the systems and the secrets that set the best apart, where you learn how to take your coaching clients to the next level, while you grow the coaching practice of your dreams. So sit back and relax, or sit up and get excited. Either way, you might want to pay attention. This could be important.
What's up, everybody? Thank you so much, Doug, for inviting me to come and interview you. I am so excited to be here.
Well, thank you for agreeing to come and interview me for the Essential Coaching Skills Podcast. And yeah, it's a little turnaround here, but it's a fun idea that you had. I'll just point out that it was your idea to do this. But
it's so fun to hear you go in and talk to all of the great people you've had on the show already. And as I am a fan as well, I thought, gosh, it's only fair if we get to hear from you. You should be interviewed on the Essential Coaching Podcast because you are an essential part of it. So if you're listening to this, you already know that. So here we go. We're going to jump in and get to some of the juicy details behind the scenes. So I wanted to start off by talking to you about your backstory and just some of the things that I know about you from being around, but maybe others don't. But you started off as a musician before getting into this coaching realm, and you did some coaching there too. Tell us about that backstory there.
Okay. Well, I fairly typical suburban childhood, I guess, whatever. But I got into playing music and decided that's what I wanted to do. And so I went to school I auditioned and got into a small college, but it still was a music department in the State University of New York system up in Fredonia, and decided that's really what I wanted to do. So I put extra effort in. I spent an extra year at university. I went to England for a year, studied at the Guildhall School of Music and Drama, studying piano and composition there. And then I came back, and of course, after having spent all that time in studying classical music, the next logical step was, it's obvious to most people listening, but I moved to New York City and joined a punk rock band, which, total logical
of course.
Next step.
Was your hair long, though? Was it like...
My hair was not long. It
Okay.
was different than it is now. But I don't know if long is exactly the right description.
Well, I'm sure we can attribute the blue and purple that is so trendy today to your roots, I'm sure.
Yeah, if my roots are showing, I'm sorry. But yeah, no, in college I had long hair. College I was kind of a hippie.
Oh, jeez.
Which is, of course, again, not exactly what you'd expect, a hippie to be going into punk rock. But when I got to New York, then the hair changed considerably. I sometimes got mistaken for like Billy Idol.
Oh, nice.
Or at least, are you Billy Idol's brother? It's like, yes, I am. It's all this hair runs in the family. This is the Idol look.
Oh yeah, I'm sure you had to do many autographs too.
Yeah, John Idol.
Well, so what kind of in your punk rock music? What kind of music would you say it was closest to? Like if we were listening to something on the radio, we'd go, oh yeah, that was kind of like what Doug was playing at the time.
Well, interestingly, the punk rock thing actually only lasted for about a year. It's a tough, hardcore is hardcore. It was like, slash really loud, fast, play as fast as, play the G chord as many times as you can in the next 40 seconds and go as fast as you can. And so it wasn't, it made me learn a whole different piano technique. I'll tell you that. But but the lead singer and I kind of said we can't do this much longer, and sort of segued out to being more of a new wave band. So then you got the the shoulder pads and then the hair got a little longer, more of a what do they call that cut where it's long in the back and short on the sides? Uh, a mullet.
Mullet.
A mullet. Yeah. More of a 80s mullet look. Yeah. I hide pictures of those times. Um, but yeah, it was fun. So we were playing, instead of places like A7, which was on the corner of Avenue A and 7th Street in the East Village, CBGB's, we played places like Studio 54 and discos like Red Parrot and Xenon and stuff like that. So it was really kind of cool. I remember, it was interesting though, because people didn't quite know what to make of us when we played places like these big discos in the 80s. We'd come out and people would just stop dancing and watch us. And then we thought we were a dance band, but it would just, everyone would just stop and watch us and then, or go get drinks or whatever. And then as soon as we were done, they'd like put Michael Jackson back on or whatever it was. And people just flocked to the dance floor and start dancing again. It was kind of weird. So we were just an oddity, little, momentary digression, but it was fun. It was fun.
So
But yeah, we recorded. Sorry.
So what happened then what happened in your world that got you to start to make a shift? Like you clearly needed to.
Oh, a funny thing happened. Somebody dragged me to a Tony Robbins seminar. I had never heard of this guy. I heard of him through the people that dragged me there, but I wasn't interested in this kind of thing. I really wasn't. They almost made me go. But I was surprised how interesting it was, this firewalk thing. Tony Robbins, just keep in mind, back in 1985, was an unknown quantity. He was like a 24-year-old kid just starting out. He had no books. He had nothing at all. He literally did the first seminar in New York City at a New Life Expo thing near Penn Station. It was like, I don't know, 200 people maybe at the first one. Maybe that was considered a good crowd back then. So by the time I did it, they were getting up probably the 250 mark for people in attendance for the weekend. But what he was doing, he was teaching NLP. The firewalk experience was an evidence procedure that NLP worked. That if you did these NLP procedures, like keep your eyes up, so you access the visual, and you say things to yourself like cool moss, instead of, oh, shit, my feet are burning. Instead of, if you did those things, then you could do seemingly impossible things. He said he had used NLP to model a firewalker. And so now he was teaching us the model that he'd made of firewalking using NLP. And then because obviously NLP was so cool, I had to stay and learn more about NLP. So I stayed for the whole weekend and, took NLP 101 basically. And then I wanted to be certified like everybody else in the room. I wanted to go to the next step. I wanted to get certified in NLP. So I did. Later that year, in October of 1985, I took my first NLP certification course from Tony Robbins. And he brought other people there like Richard Bandler, who invented NLP, and Robert Dilts, who's one of the main co-developers of NLP, and other people like Dave Dobson, who was what I thought was an Ericksonian hypnotherapist. Up to that point, people had mentioned Erickson a lot and said, yeah, he was an amazing hypnotherapist and just told stories, and people would go into trance without knowing that anything was happening, and then they'd change without knowing why they changed. And so that's basically what Dobson did. So I assumed he was an Ericksonian. Later, after studying with him a bit, he said, no, I developed what I do separately and independently from Milton Erickson, and it's different. And it is a bit, but that's also very, very much the same. So I found that out as I studied. As a musician, I wasn't certified and I wasn't licensed. I didn't have appropriate college degrees to get into courses taught by the Ericksonian Society or whomever else. So I had to sort of get through the back door as much as I could to get into those classes. But when I did, I thought, this is an awful lot like what Dobson said he did, even though he says it was different. Pretty much the same as far as I was concerned.
Well, I happen to know a little bit extra, so I'm going to kind of dig that out a little for the audience. There was a girl involved in this whole.
Yeah, his ex-girlfriend.
And there was some motivation. Tell me about what happened.
Stop it. With that. It was typical leverage in a relationship. You're going to go to the seminar, or you're never going to see me again, or something like that. So yeah.
Girls.
Yeah. It worked though, and I'm grateful that it worked out that way.
Nice path to end up down
Yeah.
because of it, right? And so what really was that call like? I mean, you saw the firewalk, you saw Tony, you kind of ended up down
Well,
that path.
I saw the promise that the things, if I learned them and applied them to what I felt was important to me at the time, I could be better at the things that I was doing. Just as an example, when I went to see certain people play the piano, like Chick Corea or Keith Jarrett or something like that, it was always like, oh my God, I'll never be like that. I could never do that. And then after I learned NLP and learned that you could model people like that, I thought, wow, I could do that. And I started to try to figure out how I could do that. How could I apply what I'd learned from the NLP to being a better musician or being a better marathon runner? I was very much into trying to, qualify for the Boston Marathon by running a marathon fast enough to meet those requirements. So I was doing a lot of that. So I wanted to, model other runners who had done that. Find an exemplar, find somebody whose abilities are what you want to emulate, and then do what they do and think the way they think and talk to yourself the way they talk to themselves, and basically do the modeling that Tony Robbins had said that he had done.
Yeah, it's cool stuff. What do you think was the big thing that you were sort of fighting against in that process? I mean, like, everybody kind of goes through that journey. And especially for those coaches out there listening, I think maybe some of them are there. But what was the big pushback during that time when you were learning and trying to get into that range where you could use it to help somebody?
Well, I'm not sure if I'm completely understanding the question, but I'll tell you that the way that it started to work, that I started making money at it and doing it professionally, was I was doing it for myself. I'd had some issues with panic attacks and trying to quit certain substances, et cetera. And I succeeded much more rapidly than I had ever done in any sort of therapist that I'd gone to. So I started seeing these changes and noticing what I could do. And when people say, hey, what are you doing? Things are looking pretty good. I said, well, I'm doing this, and I could help you with that if you want. Or somebody would come to me and say, wow, I understand you've helped my friend quit smoking. Can you help me quit smoking? And I said, sure. And said, how much do you charge? And I went like, $50. And they go like, wow, is that all? I said, I meant $150. And that was probably the thing that started me thinking I can do this professionally, because, making money as a musician was hard. As a piano teacher, or I played organ at a church for a while. There's lots of gigs I took. I accompanied a lot of singers at cabarets and stuff like that. A lot of accompaniment for rehearsals. But it's a tough slog, and you don't get a lot of money for it. And I was getting $150 for sitting and talking to a person for an hour. It's like, okay, yeah, I'll do that. That sounds good. And plus, it was very satisfying as well, because they often would come to me and say, I've tried everything, I can't do it. And, to be able to have the skills to say, I can help you with that. It was very satisfying.
Yeah, there's no doubt. And for all the coaches out there listening, I think there's easily places and times where you're looking at it and going, I know I can help these people. Like, I have this information, I have this knowledge that I've gained, but should I really be like charging them? Should I like be, because I'll help you, like, what would you say to those people that are doing that?
Oh, I'd say that's very nice of you. Keep up the good work. Or if you want to be professional, you could actually help them even more by charging them money. Because I actually think that there is a funny thing about that if people are needing to invest in themselves to a certain level of, whether it's money or whatever, but let's just talk money. but if they have to do that, it's an exchange of energy, and they are more invested in the change that works much better. Then, ironically, the more that you charge them, the more they put value on the service, and it's much more likely to be effective for them.
Yeah, I hear that all the time. What one of my mentors always said, you pay attention to what you pay for.
Mm.
And
Let me just write that down. That's a good little.
It seems true, right? So along this path, did you ever have a moment where it was, you're making this switch to coaching where you thought, gosh, what happens if I don't succeed at this? Like, what do I do if this coaching thing doesn't work out? Right? You had the music.
No, I never thought that. I think perhaps because I was coming from a background of being a musician, and I was still a musician, I could do those things. I never thought I would, go belly up if I couldn't do it. I would just do that too. I always had kind of basically multiple streams of income, which I think is a good formula. So you have multiple streams of income. You get money for doing this, you get money for doing that, you get money for doing the other thing. So I was for years I still taught piano. I taught piano through the 90s at the Brooklyn Conservatory of Music and other places privately. I still played gigs. People still I didn't advertise, I didn't push for it, but people remembered me from the last time I played their gala or something like that. So I played this year's gala. I said dust off the old tux and go play the piano for a few times. It was fun. I played piano at a thing for Mayor Giuliani back in the 90s. I didn't much care for him particularly as a politician, but it was fun to be playing at the gala where everybody was like, oh, Mayor Giuliani. And, people eating their little canaps or whatever those are called, drinking cocktails. And it'd be me behind the piano. It was kind of fun. So I did that all the way through the 90s while I was already pursuing my coaching career, while I was already teaching classes in sleight of mouth, while I was already doing NLP certification courses. I did those other things as well. So I did private sessions with one-on-one with people, quitting smoking, etc. Taught classes. I wrote books and started selling tapes and things. And so I had multiple streams of income.
It's crazy. And I remember connecting with you, back in those days, and your love and passion for it were like so clear and so obvious. Like I just felt like it was such an easy thing to be like, here, take my money, please. And it was easy. And you have always had this great vibe about you, and that is cool. So for those of you that haven't worked with Doug, you're gonna find a way. I mean, that's why you're here listening right now. You had mentioned earlier that on this path that you've been on, you've just learned from so many of these wonderful, great coaches and influencers in our industry. But along the way, who was it that was really the person that you would say, maybe it was like two or three, but can you identify like who was the guide? Who was your main person that you were like, okay, yeah, I'm going to go this direction? I mean, I know you've mentioned a ton of them, but like, who would you attribute maybe the greatest impact on your coaching thus far?
On my coaching?
Well, the coaching and your education and what you teach, because you have such a breadth of knowledge, and what you teach is so well-rounded. Like I feel like every time I've learned and been in one of your courses and your classes, I feel like I get things from a lot of different angles. But do you feel like it's influenced more heavily by one of your mentors or coaches more than another?
Yeah, that's a great question. Probably. I don't know specifically who, but I'll tell you that Tony Robbins was a big influence on me, certainly early on. And what was interesting about it, because I went to that certification course back in '85, and then again in '86, and then I got to be a trainer for Tony in '87, and became a master trainer in '88, and or maybe it was '89. I'm not sure, but at any rate. I met a lot of these guys. I told you, Richard Bandler was there, Robert Dilts was there, Tad James came, met Wyatt Woodsmall, and all these great people, and decided, well, gosh, it's amazing. I thought Tony Robbins made up this. People called it Tony's technology, but clearly he didn't. And this Richard Bandler guy is totally different from Tony, and Robert Dilts is totally different from Tony, and Dave Dobson is totally different from Tony. So why don't I learn from them too? So I went off and did NLP certification courses with multiple people and master practitioners with multiple people, and saw different approaches to it. Some I liked better than others. Some I thought were refinements or just clearer explanations or whatever. But I decided to pick the best. I figured, if all those guys can do it in their own way, then I'll do it in my own way and find out, what I think is the best of this and best of that, and, cherry pick, if you will, the best approaches. And like I said, Dave Dobson was a huge influence as well. And when I started learning more about Ericksonian, not just Dave Dobson's Other Than Conscious Communication, but actual Ericksonian stuff, I went to a kind of mentor of mine. I don't know if he knew he was or not, but he was a guy who used to run the ropes courses for Tony Robbins, who's a wonderful man. And I said, who would you suggest that I work with to really learn Ericksonian hypnosis? Because he did it, but he didn't teach it. And he was really wonderful at it. But he said, well, I kind of like that Stephen Gilligan guy. And so I said, sold. I'll go stay with him as much as I can. So I've done a lot of work with Gilligan, and I'd say he's a pretty big influence on me. But I also, at one point, because I couldn't get into Ericksonian trainings, Gilligan let me in, but most of them wouldn't. I actually found a workaround. I matriculated as a student. I got into a college as a psych major, a master's degree psych major, and I didn't actually attend any classes there. But it was prior to the internet, but it was still what would now be a kind of an online training place. It was a university without walls, so it was all supposed to be done through the mails and phone or whatever. But mostly the reason I did it is not because I wanted to learn about the history of psychology or whatever, because I wanted to have the credentials to say they would let me in to their trainings. So I did, thank heavens, get into lots of trainings by, Bill O'Hanlon and Ernest Rossi and some of the real greats in the Ericksonian world. So I really kind of met them all at one point or another. Ernest Rossi was very exciting to learn. Unfortunately, he just died just recently, just passed on. But yeah, it was pretty exciting. And then once I felt like I'd really gotten a handle on what I was looking to do and that I didn't really need to continue this degree at anymore, I let them know I would not be continuing with my education that I had never actually started in the first place. But I did get into the seminars, and that was what's important. So I've studied with a lot of the people that I ever wanted to study with. And I don't have any degrees to show for it, but it's there. The learning's there, which
sure.
I deem to be important.
Yeah. And from that, you've kind of created, like you said, your own sort of framework and your own way of doing it. And I remember going through your courses and trainings and just feeling like, oh my gosh, I'm not just learning the one thing, I'm learning about it from a couple different angles. And that was one of the things that I always appreciated, because I feel like I'm the same way too. I want to know where it came from, because I did the same exact thing. I went to Anthony Robbins and was like, okay, where'd he get this from? Come on now. It's really cool, but where'd he get this from? But being able to work with you, I felt like it was so cool to just be able to understand it. And you have such an amazing way of teaching all of this stuff, and us not feeling like we're drinking from a fire hose. And we got through so much stuff. We always do in every one of your courses, but it never feels like, oh my gosh, I think I'm going to die. How am I going to keep up with the notes? I got to read these 17 more times. Like, you usually come out of it and you're going, yeah, I feel like I know that. Like, I can do that. And that's a huge testament, I'm sure, to all of the training and all of the education that you've gotten along the way.
I think part of that is, and Michael, I'm sure that you can also appreciate this as you having been a dancer. Part of this comes from being a piano player. It isn't enough for the teacher to say, "Here's how you play it. Listen to me. I'm going to do it really well, and then you do what I do." It's like, no, that's not the measure of success. The measure of success is how well will the student do it at the end of the lesson or the end of the year of classes. You have to bring it out in them. Bring it out in them, and the proof is in the pudding. Can they play the piece at the end of the semester or whatever? So for me, it was always about how do I make this accessible to the student? Teaching NLP, teaching hypnosis, teaching sleight of mouth. How do I make it so that they can get it, and then by the time they're done, they can do it, and two, know that they can do it, and be confident enough to be able to do it out in the real world. Not just in the classroom, but out with other clients. And I will also tell you this, and I appreciate your compliments very much. It's very nice to hear. I do separate for myself the art of coaching from all this other stuff we've been talking about so far, because I learned coaching in a different circumstance. I was actually at a seminar, I think it was 1993, where I was asked to give a talk on how to present a powerful, what do they call it? I don't even know what they call it, but it's a inspirational, powerful sort of presentation like that. And I go like, well, I don't know, but I'll figure it out. And you want me to do a presentation? I'll be happy to come to your conference and give a talk. So I prepared it, and one of the other people at this thing was a guy named Thomas Leonard, who was basically the creator of coaching. He made up the field. Before him, coaches were, softball or little league coaches or basketball coaches or football coaches. Vince Lombardi springs to mind. But, he made life coaching as a thing. He made it up. And so I listened to him give this talk. I met him backstage briefly. But I said, geez, it's so interesting. He's such a compelling person. I want to do this. So I spent several months on the phone with him and going through his coaching 1, 2, 3 and other seminars, on the telephone classes that he taught, and got certified in coaching through that organization. But it's totally different. I think he gleaned a lot from the Forum and the Est Foundation or whatever, but turns out he was not in those organizations. He was the accountant for Werner Erhard.
Oh my.
and heard all this stuff and said, wow, that's interesting. I could do that, and I could apply that to people. So it's really kind of an interesting thing that he just created. And then I started doing coaching, just again like another of the multiple streams of income. I thought, well, let's give it a go. Let's see how it works. And it's been quite a few years since I started, and I get amazing. Coaching is great. Coaching is amazing, actually. So when Thomas died, it was, I think, a very tragic thing for him and for the field. But boy, did he contribute a lot before he went. At a very young age, I think it's 47 or something like that when he died.
Well, it's interesting because, listening to those that have worked with you and the people that you've influenced up to this point, I think we're getting pretty dang close that we've got to start calling some of the stuff the O'Brien strategies, or it's got to be the Doug method, because you do have a very particular way of going about it, and it's very effective, and so all of us were waiting on bated breath to get the Doug O'Brien strategies.
What are you baiting your breath with? Are they worms?
Well, we won't talk about that. Well, so along the way, you've achieved and gotten all sorts of results for your clients, for your students. What of the results that you've attained that were maybe crazier than others, what do you think is maybe two or three that stood out to you the most through the years of things that were like, wow, yeah, I did that. That was really cool. Because I know that you wouldn't brag about it, and I know that it's hard to get out. But if I'm sitting here asking, you'll probably tell us. So don't be shy. What are some of the coolest things that you've accomplished through the years, and some of the results that you've had with your clients?
Well, that reminds me of a story. Long time ago, and I probably shouldn't be telling this. Just keep this between you and me. But I was at a Dave Dobson workshop. Gosh, long time ago, 1990. Let's just say, long time ago, and Dave was telling a story about how when he was giving a seminar that Richard Bandler had attended, or was in the audience for, or whatever, and he was telling these stories about how when he was working with burn patients or doing this or in hospital situations, etc., and according to Dave, according to my memory of what Dave said, let's put it that way. Dave said that soon thereafter he heard Richard Bandler telling those same stories as if he had done them. and there's talk about how sometimes that might have happened with Richard, that he told great stories and you're never quite sure if they were true. And apparently some of them were true, but not having been from Richard. Anyway, so according to my memory of what Dave said, Dave went to Richard afterwards and said, "God damn it, Richard, if you want some experience, go get some experience." So so I had an opportunity somewhere around 1994 to volunteer at a hospital where I was doing pre-surgical hypnosis for patients, heart patients, under a guy named Dr. Oz, Dr. Mehmet Oz, who's now has his own TV show and has gotten to be quite famous. At the time, he was just a heart surgeon who did heart transplants and helped invent the LVAD device, which is a left ventricle assist device, which helped people, live long enough to be able to get a heart transplant. So people whose left ventricle was failing, this would keep them alive until they could get a new pump. He was a brilliant guy, Dr. Oz. People think he's just a TV guy. He's a brilliant guy. Anyway, I was fortunate enough to work under his auspices in the hospital there as a hypnotist. And so I did a lot of work with patients prior to surgery and saw a lot of amazing things happen. I worked not just with cancer, with cardiothoracic patients, but also did some cancer work and some other people. I was there for about 5-6 years. And during that period of time, I also had, when I was working towards a marathon, I was running a lot of marathons, as I mentioned. I did a 20-mile run from my house in Brooklyn out to Coney Island and back. And after I got back, I was in the shower and I noticed this really weird bulge in my abdomen that had not been there previously. And went to a doctor a day or so later, and he said, "Oh, that's a hernia." And I said, "Oh, that's not good, right? What are my options here? Can I, any herbs I can take? Any yoga I can do? Meditation work for this?" And he said, "Well, basically, you've got two options." He said, "You can have surgery now, or you could have surgery later." And I said, "Thanks a lot, doctor. That's very amusing. Don't quit your day job, but yeah, that's good." So I said, "Well, as long as I had to have the surgery, I might as well make it interesting." So I found a surgeon who was willing to do the operation without using any anesthesia. I was just going to use hypnosis for the anesthesia part of it.
Right.
Yeah. Put my money where my mouth is. Now, to be fair, the patients that I'd been working with got anesthesia. When I was doing hypnosis for pre-surgical hypnosis purposes, they all got, it's called complementary medicine. It's since been changed to integrative medicine, but it was in addition to what they got, through the traditional medical situation. So they got full anesthesia, of course. But I wanted to see what happened without that. And I don't want to tell too much of the story, but I'll just say I did most of the hypnosis on my own because the hypnotist that I'd gotten to work with me, I didn't like her style that much, so I mostly did a lot of it on my own. So I was listening to a tape that I'd recorded of my own, and she was there too, but mostly listening to myself because I preferred my style of hypnosis. At any rate, that was pretty cool. And when it was finished, one of the suggestions within the tapes was that because it was literally, by the way, tapes in those days. I was listening to a cassette recording that I auto reverse, and as soon as it got to the end, it played the other side and kept going back and forth.
Wow.
But one of the suggestions on the tape was that there would be minimal bleeding, just enough to keep the wound clean, and that is in fact what happened. It's a pretty standard suggestion that I would give to pre-surgical, patients, and they often got good results as well. But the surgeon who was doing this hypnosis was just flabbergasted. She'd never seen anything like this. Minimal bleeding. I mean, they usually go through 3 or 4 of these, absorbent pads on the operating table, and they just used the one that had put down in the first place, and it really had very little on it. And of course, because I didn't have any general anesthesia, I got home and off the operating table and walked out and got into a cab and went home, which was a very painful operation, by the way. The operation wasn't bad, but going home in the cab was painful. You'd hit a bump or something. It's like, oh, jeez. That was bad.
You literally got in a cab and went home. Nobody took you home.
Well, my wife was with me, but yeah.
Oh my God.
I didn't own a car at that point in time, so it's New York City, man. Come on.
Wow.
Nobody owns cars. It's too much traffic.
Right. Wow.
Yeah.
That's incredible. I admire your courage. Maybe I doubt your judgment, but I admire your courage.
Yeah. It's kind of an interesting little point because the idea is Dave Dobson referred to pain management as the Abbott and Costello method. And that sort of joke is that he said, Abbott and Costello were once in a movie where they're on a aircraft carrier in the South Pacific during World War II as soldiers, as Navy seamen. And they're swabbing the decks, and Bud looks at Abbott and says, "Hey, I bet you I can bet you I can prove to you that I'm not here." He says, "Get out of here! You're right in front of me." He said, "No, I'm going to bet you. I bet you $20 that I prove to you I'm not here." He said, "All right, I'll take your money. Go ahead." He said, "Well, let me ask you a question. Am I in San Francisco?" He says, "No, you're not in San Francisco. You're right here in front of me." He said, All right, great, thank you. Second question, am I in New York City? He said, "Clearly you're not in New York City. You're standing right here in front of me. Quit fooling around." I said, "Okay, well, let's just establish I'm not in San Francisco. I'm not in New York City. So that must mean I'm someplace else. And if I'm someplace else, then I can't be here, right? So give me my money. Let's go. So that's the Abbott and Costello routine. So basically you go someplace else. You leave your body in the operating room and you go far, far away. So I was at a beach in Hawaii in my mind, and doing lots of very thought-absorbing, attention-absorbing activities, while I was just relaxing and confident that my body was being well taken care of by a very competent surgeon. So that's how it goes.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Very cool. I mean, and that's just, well, nobody's going to say that you stole that story.
Let's hope I don't hear that from somebody else either.
Yeah, I'll try to tell it in my own way, and you'll hear it at my next seminar because,
And then another really cool thing that I had over the years is that I was hired by a guy that I knew from Dave Dobson. We were both students of Dave Dobson's at the same time. A guy named John Morgan, who had started these seminars where he would go around the country and do smoking cessation and weight loss seminars. And because he was an ex-radio DJ, he figured out that certain times of the year the radio stations really don't get a lot of commercial customers. So like January through March or so, they're really hurting for airwaves. So he made a deal with them. I said, I'll make these commercials. I'm a DJ. I know how to make a good commercial, and we'll share the proceeds. He made these deals with different radio stations throughout the country. So he was doing this for a while, but then he got tired of either tired of traveling or his knees were hurting or some reason. But he hired me to do the hypnosis part while he did all the, making the ads and doing the deals with the radio stations, etc. So it was kind of fun for me to just be the hypnotist, not have to do all the, marketing and et cetera, that one has to do in work like this. Just to show up and do a seminar was kind of cool. So I spent another 6-7 years doing that. I traveled the country on his behalf, where I do, the smallest seminar I ever did was 4 people. That was very painful, very difficult. But I did ones for typically 75 to 100 people at a shot, and sometimes up to 300 people at a shot. Or I do a group hypnosis for weight loss or group hypnosis for smoking cessation, and it was really fun. It was really a great learning experience.
Yeah, for sure. You've had so many different experiences along the way, and we probably could go on, and I'm sure the audience is going to beg you to do this again so we can hear more stories like this, because honestly, I could listen to your stories and I have for years. And we could keep doing that, but I want to kind of get into a little bit about what you feel like. We're obviously talking about coaching, we're talking about using NLP and hypnosis and different things. But what do you feel like the biggest transformation for you individually has been through all these years of learning all of this stuff and bringing in different pieces of information, helping other people? What do you feel like is the biggest transformation for you at this stage in the game?
Wow. You ask tough questions, Michael.
I'm a tough cookie.
Biggest transformation for me. Wow, that's a tough one. Gosh, I don't know. I think maybe I think one of the most important ones, I don't know if it's the biggest, but for me it's the most important ones, is to have this sort of self-acceptance that I didn't have to be Tony Robbins, or I didn't have to be Milton Erickson, or I didn't have to be, these wonderful, great people that I've worked with, in order to have value, in order to be able to say, this is the way I dance, this is the way I sing, this is my song, and to let that be okay. And I think it is okay. I think it's okay for anybody. I think it's okay for everybody. There are rare individuals. Like Tony Robbins is amazing. I don't think anybody can do seminars like Tony Robbins does. Doesn't mean you shouldn't do seminars. You should do seminars or coaching or whatever else. You should have your way of doing it. And when I sort of got comfortable with myself doing that, I think that was a huge change.
Yeah, I feel like that's such a big thing for all of us, right? Because it's so easy to say those exact things, like, well, Tony's already doing it. Like, why would I do that? And I can easily say, well, thank goodness for you in my world. And that's part of why I had reached out to you and said, hey, let's do this interview so that maybe some of the people that are here that are new with your podcast and with your teachings can learn some more about you. Because for me, you were huge, and you are huge in my world. And I know with so many of us coaches out there and people, even if they're not coaches, have been influenced so greatly by your teachings and by what you're doing, and not because you were, Tony or any of those other guys, but because you were you, and because you taught it to us the way that you saw fit. And that was the piece that was amazing. And so if any of you are out there listening to this, maybe you're listening to Doug for the first time, or you've just gotten into the podcast, he's the real deal. And you need to go and jump in and get involved with the things that he's doing. And I know that for a positive. So that being said, I want to ask you to talk to us about all of the things, not just some of the things, but I'd like to know about all of the things that you're up to, and what you're doing these days. Cause, I know times change and different products and services that you do come and go. So what kind of things you've got going on, and tell us all about what's happening in your world that we can all jump in and get to be a part of.
Gosh, I'm thank you. Thank you for that. It should not be hard to answer, but it is. I've got this thing that I'm doing called Essential Coaching Skills Podcast, and I think people would probably enjoy listening to that. And but in addition to the podcast, there's also a seminar site called EssentialCoachingSkills.com, where it's a membership site. It's a membership site, so people join. And they can join at a variety of different levels and get stuff. So at the basic level, the real basic level, they get access to virtually everything I've ever done, everything I've ever taught or made it into a product, book and PDF of the book, of course, of the recordings I've done, hypnosis recordings that I've done, classes that I've taught, classes that I've sponsored, like Frank Fairley's 2-day workshop is in there. It's all in this massive library that continues to get bigger, by the way. I keep adding more things to it as I unearth them in my storage unit and then digitize them and put them in there, etc. It's ever growing. Every newsletter that I've ever written has been digitized. I've spent the time and effort to take the sleight of mouth tips and put them into a file, and Ericksonian language pattern tips and put them into a file. So that it is a pretty massive library that you can have full access to. Somebody told me, said, take all your stuff off the market. Don't sell things a la carte. People can have it all or nothing. And I said, well, that's pretty daring. He said, well, give it a shot. So I said, I'll do that. I'll give it a shot. So that's a shot I've taken. So on the basic level, people can do that. Second level is, next level up is they can have all that. Plus I teach classes online on Zoom 3 days a week. I teach right now I'm teaching Ericksonian hypnosis, and I'm calling this thing the NLP pattern of the month.
Cool.
Going through. And again, I'm trying to do a little bit of what you did say before, which is to do a deep dive on this pattern of the month thing. I'm not trying to cram everything that I know about NLP into a weekend or something. We're taking our time. So it's not quite necessarily pattern of the month. It's like sometimes 3 weeks that we get to really focus and do a deep dive on, the change personal history process or something like that.
That's so cool.
Yeah, and ultimately it's going to be building up towards certification courses. People can actually get certified and get that piece of paper that will, show the world that they've done the work. So that's down the road further, but we're working towards that. And then there's a third level at the moment where we are also doing a mastermind group for if you want to sign up for that level as well. So it's been really beautiful, honestly. It's kind of developed this wonderful community, and amazing people are in this thing. So that's a real wonderful thing that I'm really grateful for. It's a real blessing. So
it's awesome. And so fun too. I've just been so privileged to be able to be a part of so many of those things, and you guys are going to love it. A lot of fun. Get Doug's stuff, get in there and participate in this, because it's going to help you. It doesn't matter what kind of coaching you're doing. It doesn't matter what kind of training you're doing. You need these skills. You need to add them so that whatever group of people you're helping, you can actually bring these skills to the table. And this is the place you need to be. So I hope you guys go and check it out. It's at Essential Coaching. Is that right? EssentialCoaching.com.
Essential Coaching Skills.
Skills. That's right. Essential Coaching Skills. We'll put that. We'll make sure that's in the.
Yes, we will. And yes, but thank you. And I do think part of the reasons I started it is because I do think some of these skills are in fact quite essential to coaching. It occurred to me somewhere along the line that while NLP didn't start coaching by any stretch of the imagination, there are certain NLP skills like the meta model or anchoring or reframing, as an example. Honestly, I don't know how people can do coaching without those skills.
Indeed.
And of course, they don't. They do them. They just don't necessarily call them that. People who are good at coaching are clearly going to be asking, good questions and, uncovering what the deeper belief is. And they're going to do that. But NLP is just given a structure to so many of these things that we can learn them faster and learn them to do them very effectively by learning these different skills. So that's why I started the whole thing. The Essential Coaching Skills is that effort to make those things accessible to people.
Yeah, so cool. Well, you'll go check it out, essentialcoachingskills.com. And of course, if you haven't liked and subscribed to the podcast, make sure you do that. We would love to see the likes, the subscribes, leave a comment. iTunes loves when you leave a comment because then they go tell everybody that Doug is amazing. And we want them all.
If you haven't noticed, Michael is my podcast mentor here, so I'm learning a lot from him. So, Michael, thank you for being here. Thank you for having me on my own show.
Yeah, absolutely. It's the way to go.
Asking me all those embarrassing questions, but I really appreciate it.
We'll get to the embarrassing questions on the next time that I interview. So for all of you listening, if you want me to ask more embarrassing questions, leave a note in the comment below and say, yes, we want to know more embarrassing things about Doug. That'd be great. We'll do it. We'll do a part 2 just for you.
No promises. No promises. This is my podcast.
I'll beg him. Just let me know. I'll do whatever I need to. Anyway, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for letting me interview you and be part of this cool journey and be part of all the stuff that you're creating. It's just a pleasure to be here. And I know that everybody's excited to hear this, so I can hardly wait for them to participate. Thank you for being here, and thanks for having me, Doug.
Thank you. You're most kind. This has been the Essential Coaching Skills Podcast. Thank you for being here. It's a pleasure seeing you again. Hope to see you again real soon. Come back next week when we have another gripping and exciting episode of the Essential Coaching Skills Podcast. And if you want to, you can find out more about us, each and every one of us, at essentialcoachingskills.com. Thanks.